Story 1. When I was about 8 years old, our school was doing swimming lessons and my mom worked late, so we went to after-school care and did not get home until after dark. When we got home, Mom asked me to take me to get wet togs, which is a bathing suit, and a towel out of the clothesline to dry so I could use them the next day. I was so confident going outside to do this and had this real feeling of being a big kid. Well, I walked into our backyard, only to see a man running at me. I screamed, jumped inside, and instinctively locked the door behind me as I did so. Well, as this was happening, my mom told me she heard the guy jump the gate, which was next to her bedroom, just after she heard me scream, and came a-running to find me. I slept with the light on until I was 16 years old, and I get my husband to go outside for me while it's dark. Story number 2. Not quite as bad as some people's here, but when I was at a university, my friend and I were going to a club because they were offering free shots. On the way there, we got intercepted by 2 girls and a man. The man did not speak to us and hung back, whilst the girls convinced us to come with them, just to go to a different club. Well, we were quite resistant, as we wanted to go where we were planning to go. But the girls were very insistent that we should go with them because the guy was loaded, and would pay for us to get into and buy all our drinks. At the door, the guy did pay, and his wallet was absolutely stuffed with cash. When we got inside, my friend and I had no chance to speak to each other before this girl took her to the dance floor, and told me to go to the bar with the man. He grabbed my hand and took me over to the bar. I was getting uneasy, and he still hadn't spoken at all, except to ask what we'd drink. I said single vodka and soda, and well, he ordered doubles. He didn't get himself or the other 2 girls drinks. Uneasiness starts to intensify. I say I want to find my friend, and the guy suddenly gets very chatty and very, very handsy, telling me to stay with him and tell me he has loads of money, and he'll treat me like a princess all evening. Well, I'm stood up holding 2 drinks, getting more and more concerned about where my friend is and why we've been split up. I managed to get away, unsure how now, and maybe I went to the toilet, I don't even remember. I do remember getting onto the dance floor and tipping both drinks into the corner and frantically trying to find my friend. I went out the smoking section and she did not smoke, but I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd think I'd go out there so I might find her. Well, I saw some guys I knew and asked if they've seen my friend and explained the situation. I just joked and said it felt like we were going to get sold into the sex trade. The guys laughed but said that genuinely did sound dodgy AF and we should find my friend ASAP. Our conversation was disturbed by someone launching the smoke section door open so hard it clattered against the wall. My friend stormed out screaming that I abandoned her, and the girls were trying to make her go back to a house outside of the city, near the red light district. And she was certain that they were going to sell her into the sex trade, and she had not managed to ditch them. Well, we joke about it now, but the fact that we both thought the same thing despite not having discussed it at the time makes me think we absolutely were at risk. Story 3. There's 4 teens who go onto a camping trip in Finland. The next morning, 3 of the teens are found murdered. One of them's almost dead and severely injured, but he survived. No one knows who the murderer is today. 44 years later, the 4th teen, Nils, who survived, was accused of murdering them and gets sent to prison. But then he's released a year later because there was little DNA evidence to prove it. No good evidence to prove that he murdered them at all. However, there's a circumstantial evidence such as he allegedly fought his one friend due to an argument and was drunk. Some say this could have ended in an accident or, quote, unintentional murder. However, I personally highly doubt that Niels is guilty. I could not find much information on who Niels thought the murderer was, so my thoughts are: number 1, it's too traumatic for him to remember. Number 2, he didn't recognize the person. Some other key suspects include the manager of the camp, cop who was known for being quite hostile, and also an ice cream vendor who admitted to the crime on his deathbed, and a man who lived only a short distance from the camp who claimed, quote, to be in Germany during that time. However, there is much doubt for that claim. There was a sketch released of the alleged murderer who seems to be an unsettling picture of an older man, and you can find a photo of the man who looks like the guy in the sketch attending a police speech. Story 4. Well, I'm a crime writer and once interviewed a woman who told me an unrelated horror story about something that happened to her as a girl. Well, when she was like 10, she had trouble sleeping and imagined the boogeyman was living in her closet, staring at her during the night, and every night she would come down and tell her parents, and every night her father would tell her the boogeyman did not exist, and she should go back to bed. Well, this happened for several nights, and the father got tired of it. So, the night he walked her back to her bedroom, turned on the lights and said, "I'll show you there's no boogeyman," and went to open the closet door. But something on the other side held it shut. He sent his daughter out of the room and forced the door open to find a man inside. He'd been sneaking into their house every night to stand in the girl's closet and watch her, and maybe more. He beat the ever-loving crap out of that man, and that man went to prison. When I interviewed this woman, I looked him up online. He'd recently gotten out on parole and had skipped out of his weekly check-ins. There was a warrant out for his arrest and nobody knew where he was. Gone. Story number 5. When I was a little girl, 9 years old or thereabouts, and I was playing at the school down the street from my house. It was the middle of the summer, and myself and a girlfriend were hanging around watching the boys play street hockey. One of the boys called my name and said a man in the parking lot was looking for me. The parking lot was mostly obscured by the building, but I could see an old 70s-style van that had not been there earlier. I was walking over to the van when the mother of one of the other kids showed up looking for her son and asked me what I was doing. When I told her someone in the van was looking for me, she took my hand and started walking with me, and the van pulled out and sped away. Friend's mom walked me home, and I wasn't allowed out of my yard without my parents for the rest of the summer. I was so upset and did not understand why I was being punished. It was only years later that I understood. I was likely being targeted by some opportunistic jerk for who knows what. Thanks, Miss Gibson, wherever you are. And by the way, my parents did not say they were punishing me. They just kept me close to the house, so I assumed that I was being punished. I lived in a very small, safe, quote, we don't lock our doors type of town. Kids roamed the streets from sunup till sundown, typically playing in the old quarries, on the railroad tracks, and on gigantic limestone hills and all kinds of crap we've never let our kids do today. A few people were worried about Miss Gibson's son. He was fine. We all were. She had come in from the other entrance to the schoolyard behind us, whereas the boys were closer to the parking lot. I barely got within shouting distance of the van before it sped off. Most kids are unfortunately abducted by people they know, so I have no way of knowing if it was some creep who knew me from all the activities my parents had, or if it was just some opportunistic guy who said to the boy, "Hey, you know that girl over there? Call her over here. Tell her I need to talk to her." We were all talked about stranger danger after that. Story 6. My mom was being stalked by a guy in her chemistry class. This was back in the late 70s, during her first semester at college. They were lab partners, and Mom thought that he seemed cute, nice, and was too shy at the time to ask him out. But she said if he'd ask her out, she would have said yes. They were friendly with each other in class, but their paths did not cross outside, since they were in different majors. As the semester wore on, however, she noticed he was often waiting for her outside of her other classes, the library, the student union, out in front where he had picked her up and dropped her off, and this continued into the spring semester. Puzzled but not yet alarmed, she asked him how he always seemed to know where she was. And he proudly said, "Oh, I asked the registrar's office for a copy of your schedule." My mom went to complain to the secretary who gave out her schedule, and the secretary blew it off because, quote, "You guys are dating." Luckily, Mom had already arranged to transfer to a different school for sophomore year and spent the remaining time left avoiding him. She never saw him after that, but it wasn't over. Let's flash forward now to graduation school. Mom was at work. Grandma gets a knock on the door. Since the man at the door was in a naval uniform and my grandmother was a Navy nurse, she let the man in because he looked rather sad. He starts off by saying how sorry he is for my mother's loss, which completely mystified Grandma. "Well, ma'am, I just got back from overseas and I found out my friend recently, well, he's dead. He hurt himself. He spoke so highly of his fiancée, your daughter, and I wanted to meet her." My grandmother told him her daughter didn't even have a boyfriend at the moment, let alone a fiancé. It doesn't take long to establish the man's deceased friend in question was in fact Mom's stalker. The Navy lieutenant was pretty upset, and my grandmother even more so. She made him leave before Mom got home. Well, the weird thing about the stalker's death is that it was ruled a suicide. But he hanged himself from a very high up tree branch you'd need a ladder to get to, and his hands were tied behind his back. From what my mother later learned, he had a tendency to snoop and generally stick his nose in places it didn't belong, besides the obvious stalking thing, and this did not win him too many friends, so it's anyone's guess who he might have made mad. My mom always concludes this story kind of nonchalantly like, "Yeah, back in those days, they didn't really know much about stalking. They've gotten a little better in terms of awareness now." It gives me the creeps to think what could have happened if he escalated his attempts to follow her after she left school. Story 7. A few years ago, I was living in a big city. I didn't know anyone. A guy I was seeing from abroad came to visit me. At the end of his trip, I went with him to the train that's going to take him to his home. After that, I went back to the metro to go back to my house. It was about 2 p.m. Very bright, very sunny, I won't forget it. I sat down on a bench near a man, and we made eye contact, and I said hello. He said hello back. I felt like something was off, but tried to ignore it, and the metro car came and we both got inside. It was crowded. I took a seat, and he took one available ones, which was right across from me. I started thinking I'm just overreacting, since he started talking to a man near me. Seemed like they knew each other. His friend gets off at a few stops, but he stayed. Once I saw my own stop approaching to change lines, I got up. Well, he gets up too, and was right behind me, and I could see his reflection in the metro car window, and he was very slowly looking my legs up and down and up. I start to feel uneasy at this point, and the doors open. We get off. I start walking quickly to the end of the platform, then realized he might be following me. There were several entrances and exits around, so I suddenly changed direction to go to another one. He changed his courses too. Then I turned around again and he followed. I did this a few times and he changed his path to match mine each time. Duck. Eventually I knew I had to leave someone so he would not catch up, so I went to the exit and I needed to take a change line and go home. Unfortunately, the passageway to the next line was flooded with people, so I was slowed down. He caught up with me, starts crowding me in, getting closer and closer to me, and I was backed up against a wall at this point. He was just smiling ever so brightly at me. "Hello, how are you?" he asked me, still inching towards me, and I was terrified at this point. No one stopped to even glance at us, so I knew unless I did something myself, I wouldn't get away from him. I glanced to the right and saw a staircase downstairs, and without a warning, I sprinted straight to those stairs. He was very caught off guard, and it took him 2 or 3 seconds to start following me. I flew down the stairs and straight into a metro car. I turned around to see if he was close behind, and yeah, he was sprinting down the stairs as well. Thankfully, the doors closed before he could get to the bottom, and we pulled away. Surprisingly, I'd gotten onto the right metro line and direction to go home. Not that it mattered much to me at the time. That incident and several others of men following me home or in the street make me so paranoid when I walk outside alone.